You do not lose discipline when life is easy. You lose it at the exact moment you need it most. When you are tired. When you are lonely. When nobody is watching. When your emotions are loud. When your old habits start whispering. Just this once. And that is the part most people never understand. Your discipline does not fail because you are weak. It fails because the version of you that made the promise is not always the same version of you that has to keep it. At night, you promise tomorrow will be different. You feel serious. You feel clear. You feel disgusted by your old patterns. You delete the app. You set the alarm. You write the plan. You imagine a stronger version of yourself. But then tomorrow comes. The alarm rings. Your body feels heavy. Your mind says, 5 more minutes. Your emotions say, you've been through enough. Your comfort zone says, you can start later. And suddenly, the person who was so motivated last night is gone. This is why discipline is so confusing. Because you can truly want to change. And still avoid the thing that would change you. You can hate your current situation. And still protect the habits that created it. You can know exactly what to do. And still not do it. That is not a lack of information. That is a war between identity and emotion. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself. Wake up earlier. Work harder. Stop complaining. Ignore your feelings. Push through everything. But that is only a small part of it. Real discipline is not about acting strong when life is calm. Real discipline is about staying loyal to yourself when your emotions are trying to negotiate. And emotions are very good negotiators. They do not come to you like enemies. They come disguised as reasonable thoughts. You're too tired today. You deserve a break. One day won't matter. You're not in the right mood. You'll do it properly when life is less stressful. But life does not become less stressful for people who keep postponing strength. It becomes smaller. Quieter. More controlled by fear. And slowly, the person starts believing they are lazy. But laziness is often not the real problem. Sometimes laziness is fear wearing comfortable clothes. Fear of failing after trying. Fear of being judged. Fear of discovering you are not as naturally gifted as you hoped. Fear of becoming disciplined, because discipline would remove your excuses. That is a painful truth. As long as you keep delaying, you can still imagine that you are capable of something great. You can say, I could do it if I really tried. But the moment you try, reality gives you feedback. And feedback can hurt. So the brain chooses comfort. Not because comfort makes you happy. But because comfort protects you from proof. This is why discipline often fails right before the important moment. Right before the workout. Right before the conversation. Right before the exam. Right before the application. Right before the uncomfortable decision. Your brain senses emotional danger. Not physical danger. Emotional danger. The danger of embarrassment. The danger of effort. The danger of rejection. The danger of becoming responsible for your own life. So it pulls you back into what is familiar. Even if the familiar is painful. This is one of the strangest things about human behavior. People do not always choose what is good for them. They choose what feels familiar to their nervous system. A person can say they want confidence. But keep avoiding situations where confidence is built. A person can say they want respect. But keep breaking promises to themselves in private. A person can say they want peace. But keep returning to chaos because chaos feels like home. Discipline fails when your old identity feels safer than your new one. Because change is not just about doing different things. Change threatens who you think you are. If you have spent years seeing yourself as the person who quits, avoids, overthinks, procrastinates, or gives in, then discipline feels unnatural at first. Not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. And the brain often mistakes unfamiliar for unsafe. That is why motivation feels powerful for a few hours. But identity decides what happens when motivation disappears. You can watch a video and feel ready to change your entire life. But if deep down you still see yourself as someone who never follows through, your actions will slowly return to that image. Not immediately. Subtly. You skip one day. Then two. Then you say, I already ruined it. Then you return to the old pattern. And the worst part is not the missed workout, the wasted day, or the broken plan. The worst part is the quiet damage to self-respect. Because every time you break a promise to yourself, something inside you is listening. It remembers. It learns. It starts trusting you less. And when you stop trusting yourself, even simple goals begin to feel heavy. You do not believe your own plans anymore. You do not believe your own words. You say, tomorrow, but a deeper part of you whispers, we've heard that before. That is where many people are stuck. Not in laziness. Not in weakness. But in a broken relationship with themselves. They have disappointed themselves so many times that discipline no longer feels like a plan. It feels like another future failure. So they avoid starting. Because starting would require hope. And hope feels dangerous when you have failed before. But here is the turning point. Discipline does not come back through punishment. It comes back through proof. Small proof. Repeated proof. Private proof. You rebuild self-respect the same way you lost it. One promise at a time. Not through dramatic transformation. Not through a perfect morning routine. Not through pretending you have no emotions. But by making one small promise and keeping it when it would be easier not to. Do not start by saying, I will change my whole life. That sounds powerful, but it often creates pressure your current identity cannot carry. Start smaller. Say, I will do 10 minutes. 10 minutes of walking. 10 minutes of studying. 10 minutes of cleaning. 10 minutes of writing. 10 minutes of silence instead of scrolling. 10 minutes of doing the thing you keep avoiding. Why 10 minutes? Because 10 minutes is hard to romanticize and hard to fear. It is too small for your excuses to sound intelligent. And that is exactly the point. Discipline grows when your brain learns that action is not as dangerous as avoidance makes it seem. Most people wait until they feel confident. But confidence is not the beginning. Confidence is the receipt. It comes after you prove to yourself that you can move while uncertain. That you can act while uncomfortable. That you can continue without applause. That you can keep a promise even when your emotions are not supportive. This is why emotional intelligence matters. A disciplined person is not someone who never feels resistance. A disciplined person is someone who does not treat every feeling as an instruction. They feel tired, but they do not automatically obey tiredness. They feel fear, but they do not let fear write their future. They feel loneliness, but they do not use loneliness as permission to destroy themselves. They feel the urge to escape, but they pause. That pause is power. Between the urge and the action, there is a small space. Most people lose their life in that space. They react. They scroll. They eat. They text the wrong person. They quit. They hide. They numb themselves. And then they call it personality. But it is not personality. It is conditioning. The good news is, conditioning can be changed. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But honestly. The next time discipline fails, do not just ask, why am I so lazy? Ask a better question. What feeling am I trying not to feel right now? Because behind procrastination, there is often anxiety. Behind distraction, there is often loneliness. Behind comfort eating, there is often emotional emptiness. Behind quitting, there is often shame. Behind perfectionism, there is often fear of being seen trying. When you understand the emotion behind the behavior, you stop fighting yourself blindly. You start working with the truth. And truth is where real change begins. You cannot build discipline by hating yourself. Self-hatred may create short bursts of action, but it does not create a stable life. It creates rebellion. A part of you will eventually fight back. That is why people who are too harsh with themselves often swing between extreme effort and total collapse. They do everything for 3 days. Then disappear for 3 weeks. They confuse intensity with discipline. But intensity is easy when you are emotional. Consistency is harder because it requires maturity. Maturity means you stop needing every action to feel inspiring. You stop needing the perfect mood. You stop needing life to be fair before you do what is necessary. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "What would restore my self-respect right now?" That question changes everything. Because the goal is not to become a machine. The goal is to become someone you can trust. Someone who can be tired and still honest. Unmotivated and still responsible. Afraid and still moving. Tempted and still aware. This is the deeper side of discipline most people miss. Discipline is not control. It is devotion. Devotion to the future version of you who has to live with today's choices. Every easy escape has a cost. Not always immediately. But eventually. The skipped workout becomes a weaker body. The ignored conversation becomes resentment. The constant scrolling becomes a scattered mind. The broken promises become low self-esteem. The avoided risk becomes regret. And regret is painful because it is not just sadness about the past. It is the awareness that you abandoned yourself when it mattered. But you are not trapped there. You can begin again. Not with a dramatic speech. Not with shame. Not with another fantasy about who you will become someday. Begin with the next honest action. Clean the room. Take the walk. Open the book. Send the message. Apologize. Set the boundary. Sleep on time. Do the 10 minutes. And when your mind says, "This is too small to matter," remember this. A life does not collapse in one moment. It collapses through repeated small betrayals. And it rebuilds through repeated small acts of respect. Nobody sees most of the moments that shape you. Nobody claps when you choose water over another distraction. Nobody cheers when you stop yourself from texting someone who weakens you. Nobody rewards you when you sit with discomfort instead of running from it. But something inside you notices. And slowly, that part begins to trust you again. That is when discipline stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like self-protection. You are no longer forcing yourself to do things you hate. You are protecting your mind from chaos. Protecting your future from regret. Protecting your confidence from empty promises. Protecting your life from the version of you that only wants comfort right now. So when discipline fails, do not just blame your willpower. Look deeper. Look at the fear. Look at the identity. Look at the emotional pattern. Look at the promises you keep making too big and too vague. Then make one smaller promise. And keep it. Not because it changes everything instantly. But because it changes the story you are telling yourself about who you are. One kept promise becomes evidence. Evidence becomes identity. Identity becomes behavior. And behavior becomes destiny. There will still be hard days. There will still be moments when the old version of you reaches for the wheel. But now you know what is happening. You are not weak because you feel resistance. You are human. The question is not whether resistance appears. The question is whether resistance gets to lead. Your future will not be built by the version of you who feels inspired for one night. It will be built by the version of you who shows up the next morning, tired, uncertain, imperfect, but still willing. That is where discipline is born. Not in the loud promise, but in the quiet moment when nobody would know if you quit. And you choose not to abandon yourself. If this helped you see yourself differently, subscribe for more deep psychology and self-improvement lessons.